My name is John Beeler. I'm the Policy Counsel for the American Civil Liberties Union of Minnesota. I would like to thank Majority Leader Murphy and Caucus Leader Stevenson for inviting us here today to quantify and contextualize what has occurred in Minnesota these past few months. What we have witnessed in the last 2 months is one of the largest deprivations of constitutional protections in the history of our state. It has touched every corner of our state, every aspect of daily life, and the full extent of the harms of Operation Metro Surge are just beginning to be felt and to be tallied. Minnesotans have been detained, Minnesotans have been disappeared, and Minnesotans have been killed by reckless, unaccountable federal agents. The Department of Homeland Security, Customs and Border Protection, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement have trampled on our constitutional protections, violating the First, Second, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, and 10th Amendments. The ACLU of Minnesota has received over 700 reports of constitutional violations in the 2 months that our reporting portal has been active. That's nearly 200 more than when I testified before the Senate at the end of January. The federal government has not only violated the rights of Minnesota and Minnesotans, they have trampled on the separation of powers, violating nearly 100 federal court orders in January alone. This is a constitutional system at risk of breakdown. When Minnesotans' constitutional rights are violated, their attorneys go to courts to seek remedies, and when the courts grant those remedies, the federal government must comply. When the federal government does not comply, you arrive at where we are now. Thousands of Minnesotans separated from their families, unable to contact their attorneys, unable to locate their lost family members, detained in squalid conditions around the country, and treated as pawns in the federal government's campaign of racial and ethnic violence. The good news is that the state of Minnesota is not powerless. The state can act. The state can act to protect community spaces like schools, daycares, healthcare facilities, and courtrooms. The state can act to disentangle itself and its political subdivisions from this federal violence. The state can act to provide Minnesotans with legal avenues and legal remedies for constitutional harms. And the state can act to restrict and eliminate involvement in the federal surveillance state that the federal government has weaponized against Minnesota. Thank you again for the opportunity to address you today as Minnesota's elected representatives gather to respond to our shared experience these past few months.
Good morning. I'm Senator Erin May Quaid. I represent Senate District 56, Rosemount, Apple Valley, and Eagan. The result of Operation Metro Surge, which is not over yet, I want to be very clear. We are still seeing activity in our communities. We are still having our neighbors kidnapped. We are still having observers being aggressively targeted and people being detained. This has brought generational devastation. This is something that Trump and Republicans have brought because Republicans in Minnesota will not stand up to him. Despite the messaging of the drawdown, this is not over. The day that the drawdown was announced, Jesus Flores, a father of 6, 2 of whom have disabilities, was lured out of his house with a ruse of a broken down car and then violently detained and taken away. These armed lawless agents are just the armed version of the siege that Minnesota has been under for over a year. Gutting our public health departments, withholding funding for childcare in our public schools, removing children's cancer research dollars, gutting higher education, rural hospital funds, the list goes on and on. Now, after Operation Metro Surge, after the armed part of the siege, we have small businesses crumbling, we have students who are traumatized, experiencing learning loss, we have their parents being detained. We have true devastation, and in Trump's own words, the goal was retribution. What Minnesota has experienced is an economic blockade. As our workers have been kidnapped, less people to work in restaurants and stores, build houses, our economy is close to coming to a standstill. But Minnesotans from Apple Valley to Alexandria have been showing up for one another, protecting our neighbors, providing needed relief to struggling families and businesses. The average Minnesota 10th grader, actually, has done more to stand up to this federal occupation than any state Republican lawmaker, and that is shameful. Right. So Minnesota Republicans, as we start this legislative session, have 2 options. They can continue to be silent in the face of this economic siege. They can continue to be silent while their own constituents, business owners, neighbors, teachers, doctors, children are taken and kidnapped, separated from their family. Or they can join the hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans across race, place, political and party affiliation who have stood up against this lawless federal government and demand accountability, demand that we get our neighbors back, and help rebuild once this is actually over. They have a lot of power to get this to stop, and I hope they use it.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Genaro J.D. Delgado, and as a small business owner, actively involved in the restaurant industry in Minnesota, I have firsthand witnessed the severe impact of ICE action on restaurant properties. Many of my family members and friends own Mexican restaurants, and we have experienced firsthand the chaos that has ensued due to the fears instilled by ICE agents. Among our employees, one of our workers was severely burned when he was forcibly restrained against the fryer. When confronted, an ICE agent claimed that the employee pushed the fryer back, attributing the incident to his actions, blaming the victim, just like with Good and Pretty. Unfortunately, none of these employees have chosen to testify against ICE due to their fears of retaliation. ICE has targeted Hispanic individuals, even those who could prove their legal documentation, and proceeded against them regardless. It's not about legal or undocumented. They are targeting all of us. These actions have resulted in many employees contacting us, claiming they are unable to come to work due to the fear that they won't make it home to their families. These actions by ICE have had a profound negative impact on our small businesses, leading to the closure of restaurants and the loss of significant investments. Many of us are unable to meet employee salaries, mortgages, rent, and supplier obligations. As a result, these actions have had a devastating financial impact in our businesses, resulting in the permanent closure of restaurants. If an elected official cares about their local economy, they should care about this. During my first encounter with ICE, I witnessed a 15-year-old American citizen student being restrained by ICE agent. The agent's knee was pressed against the student's head, threatening him like a wild animal, solely because of his skin color, which resembles mine. The student sustained scratches and blood on his face and was left traumatized for the rest of his life. That student deserved justice. After confirming the student's American citizenship, he was subject to a kick on his rear and instructed to carry his passport. This incident forced me to carry my own passport, which fortunately proved beneficial when I was detained a few days later. At a gas station, an immigration and custom enforcement ICE agent detained me. After verifying my citizenship, I remained there for 30 minutes, during which I experienced profound emotional distress. I felt violated and had my rights infringed upon solely due to my skin color and Mexican heritage. Something I never thought will happen in the United States of America. The feeling is indescribable. Aren't we supposed to be about freedom? My family and I, our friends, our neighbors, and other business owners have not felt free in a long time. I both live and own a business in a Republican represented district. I understand that there is a tight house right now, and the legislation that could help us could be held up because of politics as usual. This is not politics as usual. This has been an affront to humanity. If my representative, John Kosnick, cares about me, my local business, or my constitutional rights, I'm asking him to support these common sense proposals that protect us from reckless and lawless market masked federal agents. It's hard to share these stories. But if these stories can help bring change, I want to share them. Thank you for hearing them today. And thank you for every elected official that is standing up for Minnesotans, even when it means calling out the federal government. Thank you.
Hello and good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to share my story and for fighting for the Minnesotans that you represent. My name is Sarah Lekowicz. I own and operate a small construction business in Cottage Grove. I am a third-generation contractor, and I am incredibly proud of my company, and my crew is like my family, and that is why I'm here today. Last week, I was in a meeting with over 40 other contractors, large and small. Normally, at this point of the year, we're talking about contracts, strategy, finances. This time, because of the actions of federal agents, the conversation was really different. We found ourselves asking a question no one of us expected to ask. How do we protect our workers from our own government? I gotta tell you, this was not on my bingo card as a business owner. Like my dad and my grandpa before me, my employees are my family. Since December, many of them have been afraid to leave their homes. They have experienced fear, uncertainty, constant stress as they watch people who look like them being harassed, profiled, and targeted. For my business, there was only one responsible choice. We had to stop our projects because we could not guarantee the safety of our workers. These are folks who have earned legal status. They've worked hard, they've contributed, they are essential to our company and to our community. Yet, what we are seeing sends a deeply troubling message that who you are and how you look can matter more than your rights. Minnesotans deserve to see their elected officials do everything possible to protect constitutional rights, our homes and our businesses and our neighbors. This should not be a political issue. It's about standing up for people who show up every day to help build, care for, and sustain our communities. Caring about Cottage Grove in Minnesota means standing up with small businesses that serve this community, the workers who make that possible. I sincerely hope Representative Johnson will show the leadership on these issues this session. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Lee Finke. I use she, her pronouns. I represent District 66A in the Minnesota House of Representatives. I'm carrying two bills this session targeting the actions of the secret police in the state of Minnesota. The first require all law enforcement at all levels not to wear masks while on duty, with some specific exemptions for health and public safety. The second will require all vehicles intended to detain human individuals to be marked law enforcement vehicles and have safety mechanisms in them for the safe transportation of people. These are easy policies to understand and get behind. We should be able to go into the House and get not just the one vote we need to pass them, but countless Republican votes to support these. And yet we have heard no indication from Republicans at any level in Minnesota to support these reasonable responses to this out-of-control behavior. In fact, all we have heard from our Minnesota GOP colleagues is that we should let the secret police continue to carry out more state violence against the people of Minnesota. They do not want to stop it. They want to enable it. They want to assist this federal government in covering it up. And in doing so, they hope to please this out-of-control, unconstitutional, law-breaking, corrupt administration. Trump and his goons that he calls a cabinet want this violence. They want it on Minnesotans. And too many GOP leaders have shown that they want it too. Even as we live through these times, we know that history has already judged the Trump administration and its actions. Secret police abducting individuals off the streets to detain them in concentrated mass detention camps, breaking up families, deporting people without warning. We know what this looks like in our history. The Trump administration will be swept into the dustbin of despots and dictators that have come before countless times. But the Minnesota GOP has a chance not to be swept into that dustbin. They still do. Today's Minnesota Republicans should stand ready to join us, to join Minnesotans, to recognize that no person in the state of Minnesota is exempt from the U.S. Constitution. It does not matter who you are. It does not matter why you are here or how you got here. If you are here, you are covered by the protections of the United States Constitution. And yet GOP leadership in their loudest voices have blamed everyone but the Trump administration. They have blamed our local police. They have blamed the U.S. Attorney's Office. They have blamed and detained legal immigrants, citizens, Democrats who they have called for our arrest. They have even killed those who have been killed by state violence for the state violence that has killed them. These are voices that have chosen a side at our moment in history. But the Minnesota DFL stands ready to solve this problem, to work together to solve it. We stand for our Constitution. We stand for the people of Minnesota, no matter who you are or why you are here. And we stand together to say no more secret police, no more broken families, no more illegal detentions, and no more killing of our citizens. Let's stand together as a DFL and a Minnesota GOP and say no more. This is the kind of moment in history where we must say never again will we allow this to happen anywhere in Minnesota or any state in the United States. Thank you, and we will stand for questions.
Do you have no Republican authors? Have you tried?
You know, we are constantly trying to reach out to Republicans. We're not holding our breath. I think if you look at the rhetoric, particularly from Republican leadership, they're not interested in holding this administration accountable, and that's not a surprise. We have 3 House members in the Republican Party running for governor. They're all competing for the affections of the same 500 Republican delegates, and ideally, from the Speaker's perspective, the endorsement of Donald Trump. So we don't expect them to challenge. What we're hopeful for is that some other Republicans will recognize the humanity of the situation and do the right thing. You know, with a lot of Republicans in the age of Trump, there's been this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde relationship. When you're behind closed doors, they're willing to tell you that they think that what's happening is unacceptable and unreasonable. The lights come on, the cameras turn on, and we see an entirely different perspective. But I think what we've seen these last 6 weeks has been so exceptional, so damaging, that I don't know how you can be human and not respond to it. But even if it's not that, we also know it's an election year, and voters are watching, and voters will hold people accountable if they don't stand up to this administration.
Swing districts, are you targeting, you know, there's some 50-50 swing districts in an election year. Are you behind closed doors, some of those Republicans possible peel-offs for you?
If they're acting in their own political self-interest, they certainly will be. But again, we're not holding our breath. We've seen time and time again Republicans choose to follow the administration rather than follow the values that Minnesotans have. But we're going to try everything we can, and we're certainly going to give every Republican every opportunity to demonstrate that their values are consistent with Minnesotans and not Donald Trump.
I know this list that you passed out is kind of just a overview, but is there 1 or 2 things specifically out of all of these ICE operation related bills that you are really going to be pushing for this session?
I think that list contains a lot of ideas that are really important, and we're going to be pushing on multiple fronts here because the scale of the tragedy here requires that more comprehensive response. I think you heard Representative Finke talk about the need to make clear, you know, this is America. We don't have a secret police. People shouldn't be wearing masks and throwing people in the back of cars. You know, Chair Moeller has a bill to require the BCA to investigate shootings. That's critical too. We deserve accountability. No one is above the law, and Minnesotans deserve to have faith in the investigations. And you could go on and on. We have a lot of other bill authors here, so if you have questions about specific bills, we certainly can answer those as well.
I'm not sure if you guys know this, but just before this started, the BCA came out and said that the FBI has now barred them from getting any of the investigative materials. That was just shortly before this started. Do you have a response to that?
I'm shocked. I mean, look, in both instances of the killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, hardly an hour passed before we had leading figures in the administration, all the way up to the Vice President of the United States, call them domestic terrorists, spreading a narrative of events that is plainly contradicted by video evidence, what Minnesotans can see with their own eyes. It is not shocking to me at all that the federal government doesn't want an agency like the BCA, which has an incredible reputation for thoroughness of doing nonpartisan investigations. It is not shocking to me that they don't want an organization like that investigating them. But we're not going to stop fighting for it, and it will happen. There will be accountability for all of the lawlessness that's happened in Minnesota these last 6 weeks. We are a nation of laws, and no one, not even a federal agent, is above the law.
Practically, as state lawmakers, what can you do? I mean, I know you're an attorney and there's that concept of floors and ceiling, federal, state law. How can state lawmakers hold the federal government accountable and make it enforceable?
You know, I think that we're seeing, actually not just in Minnesota, around the country, that this is the age of states kind of asserting themselves. And I think there are a lot of opportunities to do that. Some things that are common sense. You know, Representative Finke's bill, as you heard, applies to all law enforcement in Minnesota, local, state, federal. You know, Leader Long has a bill that I think is, you know, passed in a few other states that would allow Minnesotans to hold the federal government accountable as well. So I think there are a lot of avenues here. You know, we're realistic about the prospects legislatively. We know that whatever we do is going to be challenged in court, but some things are worth fighting for. And if we're not going to fight for this, what are we doing here?
Is the court of public opinion the most effective in some ways and the people on the street?
Well, ultimately, the people are going to have the last word on this when we get to Election Day in November. But we've got to keep fighting all the way until there. I think you had a question, yeah.
The word we keep hearing from GOP leadership is cooperation. Is there any appetite from anyone standing up there to work with the GOP and further some of their goals on this?
Well, what a red herring. I mean, it's ridiculous. So first of all, you know, ICE has arrested 4,000 plus people in Minnesota. They've only identified about 200 with criminal records. So the vast majority of people who have been arrested in Minnesota have never had any interaction with local law enforcement, don't have a criminal record, were never in a jail that could have cooperated with ICE. It's a non-factor. And if you listen, if you believe Tom Homan, and maybe you do, maybe you don't, there is cooperation occurring. This isn't about actually solving the problem, the Republican push for cooperation. It's about shifting the focus and the blame from the Trump administration onto local law enforcement. And that's abominable. There's only one entity that's responsible for what happened in Minnesota these last 6 weeks. It's the Trump administration. It's not local law enforcement.
And for Representative Finke, California tried a mask ban, judge threw it out. Did you take anything from that in writing your own bill?
Well, as I understand it, the judge threw it out because it did not include local law enforcement, right? So we, as the state legislators in Minnesota, can't perhaps ban masks on only federal agents. But according to that court, if we include local law enforcement, we would be able to do that. And, you know, we can pass these laws. I think it's important to remember that. We can pass these laws and, you know, if we do get the GOP support to pass them, we have to find a way to enforce them in the state of Minnesota or they're not going to do us any good, right? We need the GOP to help our law enforcement cooperate with the laws of the United States and the state of Minnesota. That is the cooperation we should be talking about, not cooperating with secret police to detain and arrest and kidnap and deport people, but to cooperate in the enforcement of the law of the United States, the Constitution. Any other cooperation, yeah, I'll stop there.
Do you have local law enforcement support on the bill?
I'm working on it, yeah.
Okay, thank you.